The energy emanating from this encounter in front of a simple, yet powerful golden statue of Our Lady will forever change your perspective on the strength of collective faith and divine communication in times of crisis, because in the midst of the main prayer, something unprecedented happened. A man stood up and, without planning, began to verbalize a message that seemed not only his, but destined for every soul present. A revelation of forgiveness and hope that was manifesting as a miracle in his own heart at that very moment, proving that, even in the face of the chaos the world is experiencing, heaven is active and responding to the cries of the faithful. If you have someone in your life who desperately needs to feel this peace and this answer, write the names of these people and relatives in the comments now, because we will include all these names in the powerful main prayer with the rosary that will be said after this message. The concentration of souls gathered before that imposing golden statue was a true reflection of the present times, a mixture of fervent hope and visible weariness from the daily battle that life imposes, where each of those present carried in their prayers not only their personal burdens, but also the anguish over social upheavals and global tribulations that seem endless, from illness in the family, the financial problems that tighten the budget, to the lack of peace that plagues the heart. The statue of Our Lady, reflecting the light of the chapel, seemed to absorb and amplify all that pain, preparing the ground for something transcendent to happen, not as a grandiose spectacle of lights, but as a profound and intimate movement of the soul, that kind of response that only silent and collective prayer is capable of provoking, showing that the purpose of that meeting went far beyond merely repeating formulas, but rather to open a true door for divine action, where the strength of faith was about to collide with human fragility and produce an answer that no one expected. The silence was almost palpable, broken only by the murmur of the main prayer, when suddenly Marcos, a discreet man who always sat in the last rows, known for carrying an expression of profound sadness and chronic anxiety that had robbed him of sleep and peace for years, slowly rose from the group. His eyes fixed on the golden image, not abruptly or dramatically, but with a stillness charged with electricity. Everyone held their breath, fearing it was a sudden illness. But he did not stagger, nor did he show physical weakness. On the contrary, his posture was that of someone who had just been relieved of an unbearable weight that had been suffocating him, and the air in the room transformed, gaining a density that heralded divine intervention, because the testimony that was about to come from his mouth would not be about a future event or a premonition, but about an intimate transformation. A liberation that manifested itself at that precise moment when the community prayed. Marcos began to speak with a choked voice, but strangely firm, narrating not an extraordinary event visible to all, but an internal intervention that he felt as if a miracle were happening in real time. He revealed that he had entered the church that night with an old and heavy resentment against a family member whom he had been trying to forgive for years without success. And the bitterness was so great that it was corroding his health and preventing him from truly praying. But at the peak of prayer, while asking for the intercession of Our Lady to obtain the strength to forgive, he felt an unexpected and instantaneous warmth in his chest, followed by a mental clarity so strong that it was impossible to deny. In seconds, he not only understood that he needed to forgive, but felt that forgiveness had finally been consummated in his soul. An act that was previously humanly impossible became an unquestionable fact, freeing him from pain and fear in a way that no therapy or personal effort could achieve, attesting to the power of Our Lady in granting the grace we most need, even if it is the one that demands the most effort from us. And this personal experience of Marcos was not an isolated event, but the key to the collective message that Our Lady wished to convey to those hearts in our turbulent times. The main emphasis was not the promise that the upheavals and tribulations of the world would suddenly cease, but rather the maternal guarantee that, through her intercession and sincere prayer, Each faithful person would be clothed with the unwavering faith and resilient hope necessary to weather the storm without collapsing. She reinforced that many are losing their way, focused only on darkness and problems, allowing paralyzing fear to steal the ability to see the light of divine providence, and that true victory lies in the ability to keep one's heart firm and turn towards God, knowing that today's difficulties are the crucible that forges the saints of tomorrow, and that faith must be the armor that protects against despair and disbelief, showing that it is precisely in the midst of crisis that the miracle of persistence and inner peace manifests itself with greater vigor, offering a safe harbor in the midst of the stormy sea. The most crucial part of this message, which resonated powerfully throughout the assembly, was the incisive appeal for forgiveness, reinforcing that conversion and inner peace are impossible while resentment and lack of mercy dwell in our hearts. Just as Mark witnessed immediate liberation upon freeing himself from bitterness, Our Lady's message exhorted everyone to look inward and resolve the outstanding issues of animosity and resentment that weighed more than any external problem. She warned that the greatest obstacles to God's blessing are not the problems He allows us to face, but rather the refusal to release others and oneself from hearts bound by error, and that only the sincere act of forgiveness is capable of opening the floodgates of grace and peace, breaking down the spiritual barriers that prevent us from receiving the fullness of the promised hope, making forgiveness not just an option, but the principal commandment for those who wish to feel the real presence of the Mother and the serenity of the Holy Spirit. Thus, the final message that resonated through that curious event, sealed by the immediate transformation of the man before the golden statue, was an urgent call for spiritual action at this specific moment in history. Our Lady, as a mother who sees the future and the suffering of her children, asked for a renewed commitment to daily prayer, to perseverance in faith and, above all, to charity and gentleness towards one's neighbor, reminding us that the solution to the great evils of the world begins with a change of individual hearts, and that this was the date marked by heaven for a global awakening, where each person who received and practiced this message would become a beacon of hope in their social environment, spreading peace and mercy in a thirsty world, concluding that the greatest miracle we can seek is not physical healing, but the sincere and total conversion of our will to the divine plan, finding in it the shield and strength to face whatever comes. Everything that happened before that golden statue and the liberation felt by that man connects directly to his daily life, because, just as divine intervention occurred at the peak of the main prayer that night, so too in our daily lives, we need a moment of total surrender for great graces to manifest themselves. Our Lady reminds us that peace in our hearts, the family conversions we so long for, and the increase of our faith will only be achieved if we dedicate ourselves to persistent prayer. If we preach by example, and above all, if we put into practice the continuous act of forgiveness, because carrying resentment is like praying with tied hands, preventing grace from fully manifesting itself, and therefore the Rosary, with its cadence and intercessory power, becomes the key to keeping this faith burning and achieving the peace that surpasses all understanding, so that we may continue to unite our forces for the benefit of those most in need of grace. Comment now with the names of the people and relatives you wish to include in our prayers with the Rosary, and thus we will unite our faith for their transformation. What are your thoughts on the importance of this type of message during a time of so much uncertainty and tribulation in the world? Do you believe that forgiveness, as witnessed by Mark, is the quickest path to inner peace? Leave your honest opinion about the message of faith and forgiveness in this video in the comments. If this story and reflection on Our Lady's message touched your heart, don't forget to like this video so that this light reaches more people and, of course, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to follow other messages of hope and faith that we prepare weekly.